I was staying at a hotel that I ended up staying at for about a year, and Family Promise had come up a few times, and I'd heard some mixed things about it, primarily that it is a program, and some of the people that spoke negatively of it were not willing to go through that program aspect of it. But I was game for anything at that point, so I reached out to who ended up being Michelle and went through the intake process, and long story short, went through the program, and now I've got, I've moved on from there to transitional to an apartment of my own, which is something that would have been very difficult in the position I was in before. You've got 3 people crammed into like one area, and then you're crashing in there as you can when you're not working 2 jobs to barely scratch by the next month's rent. You're cooking on a hot plate that you got at the Goodwill. You're doing the best you can with a limited storage area, limited cleanup area. You're washing dishes in a tub using shower water because that's what you have available to you. It definitely takes a certain level of just doing what you can with what you've got, darn how good it looks, in order to get things, to be able to live in that environment. The kids are definitely number 1, 2, and 3 on my top 3 priority list. And trying to make sure that they're safe is important. And of course, to do that, I also have to make sure that I'm safe so that I can safely provide for them. I didn't really have an idea of what my thoughts were on the program until like maybe 2 or 3 weeks in. I wouldn't say that it was difficult or anything, but understanding what was expected and checking in and stepping away from an environment that wasn't healthy into an environment that was definitely healthier, but also had a lot more interaction and eyes on you and your family, and trying to mitigate that, and being an advocate for my children who had varying responses to all of the volunteers, and it ended up being all for the best, mind you, but just getting them used to such a change in environment did take some doing. There's definitely a sense of accomplishment, as well as to an extent a level of freedom that comes with that. It's a good, solid foundation to then continue to improve upon our family situation and figure out what the next couple of steps is. Stability was a big one. Also a non-judgmental set of workers that understood what it was like to be homeless. The majority of the people that I spoke with that worked for Family Promise had at some point in their life been homeless and had dealt with homelessness. That in and of itself was big. I could be like, hey, this is a situation I'm dealing with and I'm not handling it too well, and they would understand. They'd say, yeah, we had to deal with something like that similar, and this is some of what helped us in that situation. Trying to be a single parent and understanding what is available to me and living day to day in a hotel environment was very difficult. But in Family Promise, in that environment with a lot of volunteers, I was able to get to know them, understand some of the volunteers who were overwhelmingly great people, and through that kind of connect further into Billings community, which was really important for me. Getting some savings was important. When you're living day to day and you could slip at any moment, you're not necessarily in a position where you can be saving up for the next big step. And the accountability that Family Promise expects of its participants is definitely an important step towards that setup. Also, myself personally, I was so stuck in this survival mindset that I wasn't even thinking about what the next step was, because I didn't have time for that. I needed to figure out what we were doing for dinner. I needed to figure out how I was going to get the kids to school. I needed to figure out how I was going to make all of this balance with the children and work. There were days that I was literally sleeping 2 to 3 hours a night, because what option did I have? I needed to take care of things. Then I had this stability and I had this structure that allowed me to kind of address some of those issues. And with that was this sense of, okay, but how? I wasn't used to having a little bit of extra breathing room. I wasn't used to having someone to help with support and answer that. So definitely had to pull myself out of this how am I going to survive today mindset and into how can I build a future for myself and my family mindset. Definitely reach out to Family Promise. I was very impressed with how even before they knew if I was going to be a good candidate for the program, they had a lot of information for what was available for those that were facing homelessness, especially as a single male parent, because there's not a lot for families that are single parent that are just dads here in Billings. Like, that's big. Family Promise accepts regardless of your gender, and that's not necessarily the case with some other programs, so that was very helpful. Also, as I mentioned, some individuals told me, well, it's a program, not in that so many words, but maybe they complained about certain aspects of how they would be held accountable. They weren't expected to drink, etc. And for me, that wasn't an issue because I didn't really drink to begin with. But I would definitely put some of that naysaying aside and just think about what's best for you and your family, and reach out to Family Promise and see if what they have to offer would be beneficial to your family. I know my oldest was able to witness firsthand some of the volunteer work that went into things, and I think that touched him a bit, even as he was struggling with his own difficulties, because he was homeless with all of us. So it affected each of the kids a little differently. My daughter definitely kind of cracked out of her shell a bit more, being a bit more healthy about being outgoing. And definitely the structure was very important for my youngest, who now is not just surviving but thriving. And I've gotten a lot of great feedback from his teachers this year about how well he's doing, and that wouldn't have happened without the structure that the program provided. I'm still working on saving up for possibly like a more permanent place, which likely would be here in Billings. I am looking into what the next step is for me personally as far as work or education is concerned. Working on consolidating some debt. Also setting up my children so that they can be, set up for success, because it is very difficult right now for even a younger person to get into a place to stay, and I want them to feel like they have options, and I want to be able to help them with that when the time comes. They were really amazing to both myself and my children. They were a bit of love that I think they needed at that point in time. At times it was kind of tricky because we were trying to integrate ourselves into the program, and we were still a little cautious about things, which is, you're going to be when you find yourself in a new scenario or a new situation. And they were willing to learn anything they could about us, and sometimes that went from friendly to give us a little bit of breathing space, please. But that's the worst thing I can say about it. And if the worst thing I can say about it is that they might ask a question, you've got to say, look, I don't feel comfortable asking that, versus all the questions you've got to answer when you're, staying in a hotel or in a shelter or worse. It seems like a no-brainer to me.